My name is Rick Smith. I'm the chairman, and I have to read this thing that the governor requires. This meeting of the Noank Zoning Commission will take place through Zoom remote meeting technology. The host of the meeting is Larry Dunn, who's an alternate zoning commission member. I'm a co-host, so I can adjust things too. The participants in this meeting will be the commission members, elected alternates, staff, and the commission's counsel if he joins. Anyone speaking should state their names prior to speaking. I'm the worst offender. We'll have to do better each time they speak. Participants who would like to comment on an item or share a screen item should indicate by using the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen or by raising your hand in front of the screen. After the raised hand has been detected, the participant will have the opportunity to speak after being called on by the chairman. Please mute your microphones until called upon. We won't be doing, well, we might procedurally to offer a motion or second a motion. Commissioners should physically raise their hand and be acknowledged by the chairman. Vote on a motion, commissioners will be called upon individually by the chair. Members of the public who have logged on or called in will be observing the meeting, but there will be no public comment. All participants must identify themselves before speaking each time when they speak. Members of the public can submit comments by writing to the commission after the meeting for consideration on any item discussed. Finally, a recording of tonight's meeting will be posted on the Town of Groton's website within 7 days of the meeting. Takes care of that order. I'm going to call the roll now, and since the orientation is all different, just somebody jump in and we'll get to all eventually. Okay, let me identify. Beth Steele is a member. Blake Powell is a member. Nip Tanner is a member. Dana Oviatt is a member. I'm a member, and we have two alternates who participate fully other than for voting, Larry Dunn and Lynn Marshall. So, Dana? Dana, I see your hand, so. Dana, you had your hand up. What would you like to say? You're muted.
He needs to exit and reboot, is what he said.
Larry, have you made me a co-host yet?
Yes, I have. We could throw
Because
him
I can't
out.
seem to unmute Dana.
I just did. And he's not working. You want me to throw you out, Dana, and you could
Larry,
come back?
can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Can you hear? Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're having a Zoom.
Let's see. All right, Rick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. Thanks.
Okay.
Dana's not back on yet, though, so maybe he was doing the same thing you did. Get out and get back in. How much of that boilerplate did you hear before the Zoom?
I heard all of it.
Okay. All right.
All right. He's coming back in. Hold on.
Okay. Okay, Dana, I think we have that resolved now. So what were you saying?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Dana Oviatt, I had to reboot.
Okay. Okay, that was all you had to say? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we've identified all the cast of players. We have a guest in there, and we have Christine, who I guess is listening. So, okay. So the agenda was consideration of individual commissioners' approaches to STR, and within that agenda item, I think it's appropriate to do what we've talked about, which is set up a matrix to try and get ideas in a standard format so we can compare them better. I think that's consistent with that agenda item. So I haven't prepared Dana for this, but I would like to turn it over to you to explain your vision of what we ought to do with this comparison. I've got the two that you sent us, Blake's and Beth's, teed up, ready to put up on the screen if once you've described how you want to approach this. So go ahead with it.
Okay, Dana Oviatt. So I realized 3 or 4 days ago that there was a problem. The proposals are in completely different formats. It's 35 pages long. It's difficult to understand how one proposal differs from the other with regard to just about any issue that you want to talk about. And as well, some of the proposals are not consistent with what they include and don't include. Some are really detailed, some are not. So I started to panic because I didn't want to present my proposal without understanding all the rest of your proposals. And the only way that I could figure out how I could understand your proposals better was to make a matrix or a comparison chart for myself. And I thought, well, if it's good for me, I bet it would be good for all the rest of you so that we can all engage. So it has the following advantages. It serves as a reference. That is, if I'm wondering what Blake had to say about parking, but I don't remember what Beth had to say about parking, I can easily call up this comparison and see. It also provides, or should provide, some discipline as to how we should proceed and in what order, and how we should discuss the proposals. It helps the public understand the differences between them, because I've gotten, I was in receipt of several letters in the last week, and in reading through them, I realized that they may not understand what each of the proposal really means, because some of them are pretty nuanced. And I think putting those proposals, or normalizing the data, standardizing them across formats, would be a great idea for the public as well, for us. And I just think it's an incredibly powerful tool that can be used before the proposals are presented by each one of us. And so what I sent you was a very drafty suggestion of Beth and Blake, because they were the two first ones in the document. And I tried down the left-hand side to lay out all the issues as clearly as I could. I'm not sure that they're all the issues that all of you want included, but I tried to list the most important ones so that we didn't get too down in the weeds too quickly. And I was also having trouble describing them, so we'll need some help with that as well.
Other people on using this approach? Okay. Let me offer one thought, which maybe we might look at later and maybe we won't. I like the idea of the comparative purposes of these things. I'm a little concerned when it only has a subset of the issues. My whole pitch with the draft decision document in the past, and even now with this, is when we only have a partial list, we run the risk of forgetting something and leaving it out for a while, or missing context because it wasn't in there when we discussed a related point. So I took some time today and tried to put it all in a big spreadsheet, and it became a very big spreadsheet. It's like 50 different items that one of the 7 of us or more have put out there. So you got 50 items by 7 columns for the 7 of us. And oddly enough, it became very useful to me for the very reason that Dana just described, because you can look across all plans, and even if people didn't say they wanted to do the same thing in a category like the moratorium category, well, you know, some people wanted 3 years, some wanted 4, some wanted 5. That's fine, but you see it right across a row. So I thought the thing is already very useful to me. I'm inclined to want to go ahead and do this the way Dana did it. And if we get towards the end of building this list, if you want to see everything out there, we can do that too, but we don't need to. So that's my view on using this so-called matrix approach to consolidate all the ideas for comparison. So anybody else, or we'll just start building? Okay, Larry, is that a raised hand?
Yep, I got to unmute. If the objective is to populate each of the lists by individuals, then I guess my suggestion is we take a break, each of us populate our own list and then submit it back in. I'm not sure we need to all sit here while everyone populates their list.
Yeah.
Dana?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dana Oviatt? Okay. The idea of tonight's meeting in my mind wasn't to actually populate the list because I don't think that's something that the whole group can do. I think it's something that one individual or two individuals could do easily. And if it were confirmed with the author of the proposal, they could either confirm or deny that this is what they meant. But to do it by group, I think is going to be a huge waste of time.
Mhm.
What else can I say about that? I mean, I started to do it today, and it's actually kind of a pleasurable experience because it allows me to understand all the other proposals in a normalized way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I guess, and I hear what you're saying. We shouldn't try and build the body of this thing with individuals' proposed measures like 45 days here and 20 days there. That would be hard for a committee. What you want to do is build the left-hand column, what issues to address, and then have each individual name our names across the top, 7 across the top. Is that it, right? Yeah, okay. I think the issue for me is, are we better off making a short list of the highest priority issues, in which case 7 of us debating that tonight could be useful? Or should we just have everything possible that any one person of us has put up there? I'll tell you right now, the thing I did will never work on paper. It comes out to be 8 or 10 parts of a spreadsheet. So, but when it's on the screen, it's very useful because you can scroll back and forth and up and down. And so I'm wondering whether building a list of the what one person or another thinks is a key issue, we may have some difference of opinion on that, as opposed to just building a whole list. So I guess that's my question. Which way do you think we ought to proceed? Anyone? Dana?
Dana Oviatt, I'll take a stab at that. I think that we ought to include at least the items that I listed, because those are the things that we've been discussing that have been pretty contentious. And also because it may indicate which way we want to go with respect to, I mean, the things like signage, for example, I didn't include. And some other issues like parking restrictions and things like that, I didn't include them because I didn't think they would lead to a consensus of the general way that we would want to go. So, I mean, I guess I'd take mine and then see what other people think should go on there.
Mm-hmm. Nip?
Nip Tanner, as I said in my email late this afternoon, I think Dana's list of the top priority issues is a good place to start. I think this evening we should go through that list. We should tweak it if we as a group, feel the wording could be improved slightly here or there. If there's a handful or less of items that the majority thinks should be added because they're relatively high priority items, I think that is a starting point to populate it with the input that were in the various proposals would be a great start for us to have a basis from which to go forward. Once we make some good progress with that amended list of Dana's, we certainly could expand the process and go back and pick up the relatively less important issues that need to be resolved before we can draft final regulations. But I think to focus our attention for the next couple of meetings on the high priority things and one by one make a decision about where we're going to go on that issue would be significantly better than thrashing around in the weeds as Dana described it at the moment. We should try and avoid the weeds for the time being. And in my opinion, focus on Dana's list with some modifications that the group feels would be helpful.
Okay, Jen, do you happen to, did you print one of those? You didn't, yeah. All right, so we're gonna have to, if we do that, we're gonna have to go right from the start and start building a list of what we all think is the most important things to have on a short list.
I only have Dana's photo.
Pardon me?
I just have the photograph that Dana had. I don't have a document. Was
Yeah, he sent an email with a reformatting of Blake's plan and Beth's plan in a one page.
Okay, I don't have that. I have the photograph.
Okay, so that's not going to help us right now. All right,
Well, doesn't Larry have it right now, though? Can't Larry put it up on the screen?
he might, yeah. He'd have to get into that email and find it.
Oh, there we go.
No, that's the thing that I had teed up in case we wanted to look at it, which we haven't gotten there yet. And I can't control it.
Which one was it again?
Yeah, take that one out of there. Well, leave it up there for a moment. And scroll it to the top. Okay. This is what I was describing before. This has everything in it. And I did a little bit of reprioritizing, but generally that would need reprioritizing. The value of this approach to me is you don't leave anything out. I understand what Dana and Nip are saying is if you hit the high points first, you can always go back later. Well, my view is if you're going to build a big spreadsheet, you may as well have everything on it that you want to have on it and then start building in the meat of the issue in the middle. So I said before, there's two approaches. Take this one down now for a moment, Larry, and if you can get your email up. Dana sent an email today that had two attachments. Two one-page attachments.
One from Blake. All right, I got it.
Yep.
All
This is
right, let me
Dana.
share that.
Yep. If you can put one of those up there, either one doesn't make any difference. Blake or Beth. There you go. Thank you. All right. So this was the short list. The other one was a long list. If we go with this, we need to start adding things in that we think are important. So that we have one list that everybody agrees to. So who would like to go first? I always have something teed up, but I can wait.
Let me just look here.
Hang on, Beth. Let me make sure I get everybody in here. Okay, now Dana's at the bottom. All right, Beth. Wait a minute, I gotta unmute you.
I just did.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see your list before the meeting. Does
No,
your
I didn't.
list have all of the items that, for instance, Blake has on his?
Probably, except Dana retitled them. So it's hard to say. You know, on-site, off-site is really that whole, the local secondary contact, whether, you know, whether the owner is on-site when the rental occurs or whether he's off-site and the local agent has to be called and go there. So these will take a little bit of interpretation because they're retitled.
I mean, my thought would be if your list encompasses everything that is on this list and more, why don't, as homework, we all go back and the ideas that we had, populate them into that list? Yeah, and some of those things that I'm sure on your list, when I looked at it, I did not address, but I can then go back and formulate an opinion on those particular issues. And then if everyone populated the same spreadsheet, then we would have what Dana was talking about. We would be able to know, you know, go down 3 over 5 and know exactly what that person thought on that particular issue.
Yeah. The added advantage is I don't think I changed definitions. So like one thing that I think is important that's missing is moratorium on STRs. But the next thing is rental periods, and this has a different definition of that. So you have to search and figure out which one did that mean. Events, parties is easy. But the redefinition thing, and I hadn't noticed this when I read the email today, it does, you need to scratch your head a little bit and figure out like legal resident, what does it mean? On-site, off-site, that's a little easier. Larry, put that big one back up there again for a minute, if you would. All right. Well, actually, I did the same thing. Rentals per month summer is kind of what it had said in I think NIP's original matrix or one of these successor ones. So the only difference is if you have to read it and think about it a little bit, then there's no really difference between Dana's and this one. The value of this one is as everything and you don't forget it. By the way, I spent almost all of the day and got almost all of my vision of what people wanted out of their plans into this thing. This is just the format, but the one I worked on all day has all of it in there, subject to people reading it and saying, you know, that's not what I meant. And the most difficulty I had with that one was Lynn's because it's in a vastly different format than everybody else's. So it's harder to find what category it goes in. Not impossible, it's just a little more difficult. What I'll do tomorrow anyway is send that out. And if you're gonna repopulate a list, it might be helpful to see, you know, what came out of that effort. And if you don't wanna use it, you don't have to. So still, I guess what Beth is saying is it better to go start with the whole list and fill in the blanks, or is it better to start with a short list and add later? Blake, let me unmute you. Yep. Go ahead.
So it's part question and part comment, but Dana, does this accomplish the same thing you were trying to do, but in a much larger level of detail? Actually, yours might even ended up there as you went through each of the different proposals and added categories. But if it does, then I'm fine using this. And if Rick's already populated it, taking what he's added and reviewing it against what I submitted and changing it or whatever. But then the additional piece I think we should all do would be to prioritize these things, whether we color code them or something like that, for what we think would be the highest, medium, lowest priorities, that is from our perspective.
That was a question for you, Dana. So
So hard about a spreadsheet today and whether I should include everything. And I guess I decided that I didn't want the whole thing because I just wanted the issues. I just wanted the issues that were important for, the most important for making the decision as to which way we were going to go. And by the way, for example, offsite versus onsite, that wasn't a reference to whether you should have an agent onsite or offsite. It was actually a reference to whether you should only have an owner. You should only have owners who are on site, which has been suggested before. So that was a pretty large subject. I wanted to pick the most contentious, largest subjects so that we could start to move forward. And I think if you include all this list without prioritizing, we might be undisciplined enough to start discussing things that really aren't going to put us forward to where we want to finally go with this stuff.
Lynn?
Well, Rick, I think that since you really have already populated this document, that it's a useful one for everyone to have. And I can give you a suggestion as how to clean your difficulty you're having with mine up.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a useful reference, but I think in terms of what we actually focus on, the summary of the most important issues, that we have what Dana's talking about as well. And that would probably be the one that we would refer to the most. The other is just there, as you say, because you've already done it. It would make sure you don't, when you go back, that you don't forget any of the issues. So I think that's very useful. But for purposes of our moving through this, I think that focusing on the key issues, because that is the trick, to try to not get in the weeds, and just, focusing on how do the different parameters chosen by each person, how do they fit together, and how well do they meet the goals? So at the end of it, we can see for each of these proposed ways of doing it, what are the advantages and disadvantages of those approaches relative to our goals? And each one of the approaches has advantages and each one of them has disadvantages. And that's what we have to all, I think, really, it has to be really firm in our minds.
Okay.
Big picture, yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's fine with me. We can keep the larger list in the background. I guess then the question is, what we want to have on this list and what priority we want them to have. And since it's one page, I don't care much about what order they come in, but I do care that some things that some people think are important, other people may not. And that's probably where we ought to spend our time. And I think that's what Dana was getting at. Build that left-hand column to our satisfaction tonight. So we can just go around and everybody can add one in or suggest why something they think is not as important as it enough to be on there. You could do it that way. Nip.
I like Blake's idea that whatever list we work with, we each get a shot at prioritizing it, so that the one we build collectively represents a consensus on. And it's, I think Blake suggested, 3 different gradations. I don't think we need to numerically rank whether it's 20 or 50 items, but I think the next move should allow us to focus on the ones that we collectively agree need to be in the top group. We don't need to all agree on what's number 1 and what's number 5, but I think we need to agree on which ones are what group is the one we need to focus on in our next efforts.
Larry?
So having heard all that, it seems to me that if you distributed your populated list, we would validate it. And then each of us would say, here are the no more than 10 top items, or pick a number. And if you look at that across, the commission, I think you'll readily zero in on what are the top items, whether it's the top 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't think it's going to be more than 10. I took a whack at it myself. I came up with 6 that I thought were the priority items.
So send this out and let everybody get back to me with their top 5 to 10 and see how, we'll never come to agreement on that. I can just see that, and that's part of the concern I have with Dana's list, that, everybody's going to feel that something else is important to be on, which is why building a whole list. The problem with my list is I haven't prioritized it yet for what anybody, including myself.
But you'll wind up with 5 items that are priority 1, for example. Yeah. That's all I meant. I didn't mean we have to agree on top priority.
If there's synchrony between the 7 of us as to what are the most important things. Whose hand was that? Blake first and then Nip.
I was just going to clarify one thing about what Larry was saying. You say pick 5 or pick 10. I would say everyone goes through their own list of items that they included in the proposal and prioritize them based on not a specific number, but just highest, medium, and lowest priority. And because some people have very long, detailed proposals that are going to have a whole list, long list of items. They might have, a whole lot of things that are low priority. Maybe it's just a handful of things that are high or whatever. Some of us, my proposal didn't have a whole lot of items in there. And so most of those things, from my perspective, are going to be high priority. I just didn't include low priority items so much.
Yeah.
I just be cautious about everyone including the same number of high priority, medium priority.
Right. Okay.
Good idea.
Nip.
Nip Cantor, as a technique in running a meeting, it works quite well if you're trying to prioritize a list of 10 items. If you give everybody 5 votes and everybody gets to cast their votes independently. And typically what happens when you tally the results is you get a clear group of winners out of the 10. It becomes very clear and it may only be 3 or 4 that rise to the top, but it's a very simple, very effective way to get a group to prioritize a longer list. And it does involve giving people a specific number. And it's usually a fraction of what the whole list is. If you're trying to prioritize a list of 20 items, you might ask people to indicate their top 7, maybe their top 5. You wouldn't ask them to rank all 20 if the goal is to just get the group to prioritize the overall list. So it works very effectively.
We could actually do that right now, couldn't we? Because you have everybody's column and you have all those things, and well, probably not. People needed a description even of what these things mean. So, Lynn?
Yes, I mean, I hear what Nip is saying. I think you've got to use some common sense along with that, not strictly go by that, because there may be one type of proposal that could have a unique approach that would make it like totally different from the others. Yet other people, it's not the most important thing in their proposal. They don't even address it. So you could get some oddities there that, so I think there's got to be some judgment along with that.
Okay, what's your pleasure? You can't do the sticky dot thing probably right now because people are going to ask, what is rentals month other times, just to pick one, or moratorium on STR, what does that really mean before they can give a vote? My inclination, just float this as a trial balloon, I'll send this populated matrix out tomorrow. You can look at it and see if it makes sense for you to want to prioritize off of that. If it doesn't make any sense, it's no skin off my nose if we just discard it. I'll be happy to. I did it for my own use to see, because I was intrigued by Dana's suggestion. So I did this just to see how it would work out. And right now it's a blank page, but when I saw the populated matrix, it was very insightful for me. So you may not have that same impression, and that's fine with me. The alternative is to take Dana's list and everybody start to add something that they think should be there that isn't. And that'll be kind of a laborious process, but it might also turn out to be useful. Two approaches. Beth?
Why can't we do both? I mean, why can't we populate this matrix with our ideas and then just put 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 next to what we feel is important? And that way, you know, I think like Nick said, you'll get a consent. There's going to be some consensus. Maybe everybody doesn't say this is number 1, but it's on everybody's list. So it's the most important.
Are you saying do that based on the large matrix or
Yes.
Dana's?
Yes, the large one only because it has
Well, we can
or
do.
Dana's. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever the group's pleasure is, but I don't see why we can't do both.
Uh-huh. Well, in that case, what we should do is work on Dana's tonight, because that's the one that's more amenable to adding things in that look like they're missing.
I'm in a meeting.
So if we want to pursue it that way, we can do that, see what we come up with. I got the sense the last few days, people didn't want to make this into a 2-hour meeting. So again, we can, Beth?
Well, what I was really suggesting was that, again, we pick one of the matrices. It doesn't matter to me. We pick this one, we pick the other one. We go home, we populate it ourselves.
Okay.
And then while we're populating it, we also list our 5 top priorities.
All right.
And we submit them prior to the next meeting. We can determine what the top 5 are that people want to discuss, and then we can just focus on those, or top 3 or top 10 or whatever number suits your pleasure. And that way we'll have a matrix that will say what everybody's position is on those issues, and then we can just start debating it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Everybody comfortable with that?
I'm not sure, no.
Lynn?
I'm not sure exactly what's being proposed there, and then we'll just start debating. I mean, without having people presenting their proposals?
Or presenting, I mean, maybe I misspoke. If you want to present it and then debate it, that is fine too.
I think there's a sequence here. Dana did the yeoman service to try and get us to standardize these things so you could look across, in his case, 7 pages and look at similarities. When I heard that and thought about it, I decided to do a spreadsheet. That's just 2 different ways of doing the same thing. Then we have to decide whether we're going to have individual presentations, which I think Dana was saying we can do that after we have a matrix that gives us a sense of comparison of the different plans. which is fine with me. You know, advocated that earlier, so I'm not disagreeing with you at all. And then once everybody understands everybody else's plan and everybody sees the comparisons and the dissimilarities on a matrix or these one-pagers, then we can start to make decisions. So it's sequential, and there looks like there's 3 steps to it. Nip?
Yeah, I agree with Beth. I think, given the amount of work that you put in already, it seems to me it makes sense to take your draft populated matrix, send it out to all of us. We each get to correct any misstatements that we see in how you've represented us.
Yep.
We can also indicate our priorities. As I said earlier, if we're going to be looking at this whole list when we set our priorities, I think 5 is too small a number. In my experience, it will end up with maybe 3 that get a significant number of high priority votes. It might end up as high as 5. I'd be surprised at that based on my experience. I think 7 would be better, because it's the next step when we start to tackle the ones that have been identified as high priorities. I think we want to have enough meat that we can keep going for ideally a couple of meetings, and not, run out of things to debate in half an hour or 45 minutes. So I just recommend a higher number than 5. The question about each one of us then presenting our plan, I'm not convinced that that's a good use of our time. I think the logical next step, once we have the prioritized matrix, is say, okay, this is number 1, or it's number 1, or it's number 2, or whatever. And here's what the 7 different people had to say about it. Let's discuss it, and let's make a decision about where we're going on that particular issue. And as we work our way through the priorities, then we will start to develop a list of answers that can be used to craft the regulations. I think at this point, we've all heard each of us offer our thoughts and our opinions on many of these items multiple times. And I'm not sure it's worth investing a lot of time now to go through that process again. Yes, admittedly, more formally than we've done it up until now, but in reading the proposals from each of the members and alternates, I understood where they were coming from. I've heard them say enough in our meetings going back, a year now? I have a pretty clear idea of where they're coming from. And so, their words, and Blake's and Beth's, both made sense. Everybody's made sense to me in terms of where they are coming from. And I'm not sure, I don't feel I would get a benefit from them taking the time to explain that to me again.
Lynn, I see your hand, but I would like to respond to Nip after you speak, because I'm going to mark the record because I agree with him, and we should always. But that's not to suppress your point of view. I'm only looking for a little bit of humor here for the moment. So Lynn, go ahead.
I could not disagree with you more, Nip. That's what we have been doing for a long time, discussing each item, each parameter, independently of anything else. We have not discussed a whole package together and how it meets the goals. We only got a list of goals at the last meeting. And that, in my opinion, is what has been lacking, is that we're not taking a cohesive set of plans and seeing how well it meets the goals. The goals are not there just as pretty words to use as justification for whatever it is we decide. they are to see that these were the things we decided were most important for Noank in particular. You know, if it were Groton, it could very well be a different set of goals. I don't know, probably would be different. This is for Noank. We have not really discussed how well each of these plans would meet those goals. That's the presentation and a Q&A, and the Q&A can clear up any ambiguities. It can be addressing how well something meets the goals or does not, and really dig in on a Q&A. And I think that would be very beneficial.
Before you go, Nip or Dana, because I had said I wanted to comment, but Lynn had her hand up first. Here's where I agreed with Nip, but I also hope I have a compromise here between the 2 points of view. Nip's point to me has real value, because once we get this whole thing populated with what everybody agrees is a fair representation of what they believe in that cell or that management measure, you can start to compare them, and where the debate should come in and the presentation of the plan is when there's a difference, a disputed point, and I have a view on something and Blake has a different view on that. That's where I should present what I think on that point, and Blake can present what he thinks on the point, and the rest of us can listen and say, okay, now I understand these guys, which is what I wanted to do with Lynn's approach with the plan presentations. Make sure we all understand what the author thinks about their plan and why. But I agree with Nip. I read through all of that stuff very carefully, and I think I have a pretty good sense of what everybody feels. What I don't know yet is when there's a difference of opinion between a couple of people, I would like to hear the point counterpoint, because the rest of us can then make an informed decision. So Lynn's desire to present these things, I think, can happen as we go through a matrix and we start to decide, how do we all feel about that row, that issue, moratorium on STR? How do we feel about it? And people can offer their alternate points of view, and then we can decide. Now I had Nip and then Dana and then Lynn.
Nip Tanner, I understand Lynn's suggested approach, but as I said in my email, we're not being asked to decide which of the 7 proposals we think is the best one. We are, I think, headed in the direction of a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. You know, it's going to be more like a Chinese, putting a Chinese meal together than something similar to what the Groton governance people did with regard to the Noank school property, where they asked for separate proposals and then they decided which of those proposals they liked best. That's not the case here. I think all of us have put out what we think are important points, but as I read through other people's proposals today, I saw 2 or 3 items that I hadn't thought about, but made sense to me. So as we go forward, I'd like to see them included, and I would, you know, vote for them when they come up for discussion. But I don't think we need a full-blown presentation from each one of us to successfully move the process forward at this point.
As long as you leave open the possibility that we'll get to a point where someone either has a question or there's a difference of opinion, that's when the debate ought to occur.
I agree. I again, mark this, I agree completely with how you described how you saw that process proceeding.
Okay. That's a twofer for the rest of you who are keeping score. Okay, I had Dana and then Lynn.
I'm beginning to regret that I ever put this proposal forward, because it sounds like it's slightly being perverted into something that I had never intended in the first place. I just want to remind you that the issues that I had listed down here were not for discussion as to whether they were important or not important. It was only as as an item to be put on a list so that we could so we could normalize other people's proposals in those particular issues. That's it. It wasn't what people thought of, you know, rental frequency or limited permits or that. It was, you know, what did each person think in each column? So I want to make sure that you still are on board with that. Second of all, I am definitely looking forward to presenting my proposal because NEP, I don't think really it has been understood by some of the board, and I don't think it has necessarily been understood by the public either. And finally, the definition of each one of these things is really important. Whether we use Rick's column there or whether you use mine, it's really important before this thing goes out that the definition of each one, that we all agree to the definition of each one and that it's understandable.
Well, I actually agree with that, and it's beginning to tilt me back towards tilting me back a little toward the presentations, because I've encouraged Dana to put his ideas into a plan and then have a last bite of the apple on it because, and maybe persuade people, or maybe not. But I don't want anybody to feel, Lynn also I know has this view, that they're being suppressed from doing what we set out to do 3 weeks ago. So I'm trying to lean in towards use the matrix approach, but now I'm getting a little bit uncomfortable that people are feeling that they're not being heard. And I don't know if Dana and Lynn are satisfied if the debate on provisions of their plan come up as we go through the matrix, or whether they feel, now see Lynn, okay, you want to present the whole thing and make sure people peek and poke. Is that right? Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Dana does too, just from the way he spoke. So we have two decidedly different points of view, and we just need a majority to decide. And I'm going to stay neutral and see how other people feel, because I see merit in both. If one of the 4 other commissioners want to offer a motion for one approach or another, that's one way of doing it, or we can debate it a little further. Hang on a second, Lynn, I see it, thanks. Just to move us off the dime. You know, we need a preferred approach because those two are very different. What I suggested and what Dana suggested are kind of similar. What Lynn and Dana now are proposing, and that's how we started this 3 weeks ago, is very different. So if we're going to have a seminar over a couple of meetings and everybody gets 15 minutes and then more for questions, we can do that if a majority agrees to it. If we think we can jump the line a little bit and get into the matrix and start decision making and let people debate as the need arises, that's a different motion. And I'm just going to sit back and see who wants to try and drive it to a conclusion. And Lynn, since there was a dead air there, I didn't want to tell you no, you couldn't comment at all. I just wanted to finish what I was trying to say. So go ahead, Lynn.
I just have one question, and that is, why is this commission so adverse to discussing the goals in relation to any regulations? That's what it sounds like to me.
I think that's presuming facts, not in evidence. I mean, I look at the goals as, you know, the background of what measuring everything we do against. I don't have a presentation for that. I look down the list of all these things and, you know, it's hard for me to find one that doesn't fit into our goals one way or another. So that's my answer to that, although I jumped in too quickly, probably.
I don't think it has happened, and it looks like it's not going to happen. That concerns me.
Okay. Is there a vote or a motion? Is there a preference that people can offer and we can see if we can develop a consensus? Blake?
Well, I still think we need the next step would still be to review what you've populated and validate this table and prioritize the items, however we want to do it. And then we can still have a presentation of people's proposals and what their general philosophy toward each of these things are. And that might clarify how they're prioritizing their items. But as a next step, I still think we can do what we were talking about just a little bit ago, which is, use this format to populate it, validate it, and prioritize it.
Okay. So reserve judgment on whether we want to have presentations or not. Is that what you're saying? Start with this, see where it takes us, and then maybe do presentations.
I think this is going to be useful no matter what, whether we have presentations or not, just to, like Dana said, to normalize things in some way.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
If that was a motion, I second it.
Okay, so it wasn't, but that's two people in favor of work on the matrix and preserve the opportunity to do presentations if, as we go through the matrix, we realize, yeah, we need to hear more from people, so let's have the presentations. Beth?
I would third it.
Third it. Okay. So that's kind of a 1, 2, 3, that's 4 people. Dana?
I'm not sure what the proposal is. I'm confused. When you say you're going to take this matrix and you're going to populate it, I understand that with the various proposals, solution to each one of those things in the left-hand column.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you going to do?
I'm going to send it out to everybody because it's already done.
Yep.
And we're going to look at it and see if I captured what you wanted to do accurately. And you're
Yep.
going to tell me if I screwed up or if I got it right. Once we agree on the content of the table, then we can decide whether to use it as a decision-making tool right away, or whether we decide, yeah, now that I see all of this, I want to hear the presentations. Yep, I get that wrong?
Yeah, you missed the step of when we review it and confirm or modify what you've put in for each of us, we're also going to prioritize it.
Yeah.
Can
Should
I
I
just,
take a first stab at that, or should I let everybody just put, that's the sticky dot thing. I mean, which way would you rather have that done?
I think we all have to do it ourselves.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Prioritize everybody.
We just need a standardized way of how you want to do it, Rick. I mean, we could
Yeah.
color code each of these things. You got to pick a handful of categories. We could put numbers to them somehow. A handful of different ways of doing it, but we should all do it the same way.
Okay, Nip had a better sense of how to do this than I do. So what's your suggestion, Nip?
People vote for their top 7.
Okay.
They don't need to rank them. They just say, out of this whole list, here's the 7 that I think are most important.
Okay.
That
Everybody
just
good
makes
with
it
that?
simple.
I'm good with that. Lynn?
I think that 7 is an arbitrary number and we don't know how many it takes to, because we haven't tried to do it, to describe it well. I like the idea of high, medium, and low.
Well, actually, that's ranking them. And I think I see where Nip is coming from, that let's just find out what we all think is a high priority list, unranked. If you want to put in 10, that's fine. I mean, but inevitably, we're going to filter this down to where 5 of the 7 of us think the same thing ought to be number 1, and that's going to solve that problem. We'll know what number 1 is, and we'll go down in the list. Doesn't that make more sense to do? You shouldn't feel constrained by 7. You can put more or less in, but 7 is kind of a target number to use.
I mean, the page that Dana had has 14, and that's on one, fits on one page.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be able to describe things adequately with just 7.
All right. Bigger number? 10? Because I don't care if it's 7 or 10. That's the weeds.
I don't know until I've tried to do it. I haven't tried to do it.
Okay, then we shouldn't do a number on. Send in a list of your high priority items, however long you want the list to be. How's that?
That's good.
It's going to be a mess.
It will be, but we'll find that out when we see the lists, because somebody's going to do 4 and somebody else is going to do 22, and we're still going to end up looking for the top 4.
But then the people that have the long list have a disproportionate weight on the outcome. In order for it to be equal, each one of us has to have the same number of votes.
Well, these aren't votes yet. You want a list that's unranked. You just said put in 7 unranked.
That's true, but where those 7 get distributed by the 7 of us will end up determining which ones are higher priorities and which ones are lower. But if we don't all have the same number that we indicate, it will give disproportionate power to the people that vote for a lot versus the people that vote for a few.
Okay. Hold on. I got a housekeeping issue. Larry, you're going to need to bolt in a minute. Yeah. Larry's got to go. So the only thing I have to do here is when we're done, I have to stop the recording. Do I have to do anything else with Zoom?
Nope.
Okay. So I will
I'm sorry, end the meeting. Yeah.
well, yeah,
Stop the recording and end the meeting.
end the meeting on Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I have that list here, so I can't forget it. So I probably will. Okay. That was an aside. What's everybody's pleasure? You want to pick a happy number and say 10? That's between 14 and 7. What I don't want to do is have this matrix prioritization span a couple of meetings, and we're just going to spin our wheels backwards and never get to making our important decisions. So let's not belabor this too much, and 10's between 7 and 14. Let's just do 10 and see what it looks like. You're all going to need time to look at what I put together in this thing, because you may not like how I characterized your view. I had to summarize. So Blake, and then
10's fine with me.
okay.
But another question, how do you want us to do it? It seems to me if we're going to go through this exercise, none of us should be changing any of the items in column 1. We might have difference of opinion on how it's defined and whatever, but if we start adding rows, then this whole thing goes out the window because we're not going to be able to compare apples to apples.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what you intend? I just want to clarify that.
I hadn't, but you make a good point. So the problem will be as you start to look through this and A, you don't understand what's said, or B, you don't like what's said. Then
Well, I think we just find the one that fits closest in our answer in our particular column what should clarify that.
and importantly, if you go back into everybody's plan, particularly when you see Blake had a comment on number 12, everybody else can look at that and go back in and see your plan, what you said about it, not just what the summary point is. So if you got any confusion on the summary point, you go into the plan, see what it was. Most of these are bullets or a couple of sentences in the plans, so it won't be real complicated to do that. But that's a way to get clarity in what's on that list on the left. I had Dana after Blake. So
10 is fine with me.
Okay, so, and going back to what Nip had said, let me make sure I have that right. We're going to send the matrix out to everyone. Everyone's going to prioritize by sending in their top 10 items that they think are the most important, and we're going to see how the ranking of that happens. We're not going to change language in the left-hand column. Okay. All right, everybody comfortable with that? that give you enough to chew on? Our next meeting is going to be July 21st, which is a regular meeting. There does not look to be much on the agenda yet, but that could change next week. Importantly, we had hoped to have the solar hearing at that meeting, and process stuff got in the way, and it's going to be in August. So that part of the agenda won't be taking up any time. So we might have an hour and a half of the night of the 21st to work on this. That gives you about 12 days. I'll send this thing out to you tonight or tomorrow. And so you're going to have 12 days to look it over and do what we just described. And I'll put a cover email on it to summarize Nip's point, what I just said. So is everybody good with that?
Yep.
Dana? Dana and then Nip.
Could I just ask the group one more question? Maybe just Rick or Nip or somebody. When you go down through this list and you pick and choose which are most important, what criteria will you be using in order to determine what goes in and what goes out? I'm just curious, just as to check on things.
I have a view on that. I think it's the individual's interpretation of what they think is most important. There will be some variance in that. You may say limiting permits is really important. I may say number of bedrooms, for lack of something stupid that I just saw caught my eye. You know, we're going to have differences of opinion. That's why everybody submitting 10 gives you that sense. I think the only thing you need to judge is, do you think the thing is important that you're putting on your top 10 list?
Okay, so what you should be thinking about, the original plan, my original proposal was that we pick 10 or 15 so that we could adequately differentiate between the 7 different proposals. It was not to go back the way I feel that we did 3 or 4 months ago and rehash what we thought was most important. That I just want to point out, that doesn't seem that doesn't seem at all like the plan that I suggested today. And if it's not the plan, that's fine. But you should know that that wasn't the original plan that I had.
Okay, then I need a reminder because I'm juggling with all the balls in the air. What's your original plan? And everybody else listen, and let's decide if we like that better than where we're getting to so far.
Well, Rick, you phrased it best about 15 minutes ago when you went through what you thought was going to happen. My original plan, my original premise was, gosh darn it, it's really hard to understand this 35 pages because it's formatted differently. And what I suggested to myself is normalize or standardize all the different opinions that were put in this proposal so that I could just look down this list and see, what did Blake propose with respect to limited permits? What did he propose with respect to age restriction or rental frequency, or his take on whole houses versus apartments, if they should be treated the same or different. And then I could go over across easily to the next page and see what Beth or you suggested. But that's not where you're going with this right now. Where you're going with this is where you're...
I think we are. I think we just jumped ahead on the line of all the things to do. Because the matrix should show what everybody feels about an individual point. And you see that comparison, which I value. That was a great suggestion to do. It helped me today. What Nip is saying is jump to the next step and start to set up a sense of priority so we know which ones are at the top of the list and which ones can be at the bottom. So I don't think this is inconsistent with what you started out trying to accomplish. I think it just goes a little farther than you intended initially. Nip and then Lynn.
Yeah, and it's practically, it's not going to be much different than the fact that Dana chose the 14 that he thought were the most important out of, whatever your count was, Rick, but I gather it's 40, 50, something like that. Dana picked the ones that he thought were most important. We all had 10 votes. I guarantee you there will be at least 14 items and probably closer to 20 that get some number of votes. The low counts will probably be only 1 or 2. So they're not going to rise to the level of being a priority. But with each of us casting 10 votes, there is going to be a list of a handful plus 1 or 2 handfuls that are the ones that we want to focus on first. I don't see that process as significantly different than what Dana was suggesting, except that once we have the information that Dana was proposing get laid out for us, we are then going to start making decisions based on that information. Possibly, we'll be in a position to make decisions based on that information. But we'll decide what to do after we see where the votes are.
Right. Okay. Lynn?
Yes, this is just a point of clarification. So I'm seeing the this chart as being a way to make it easier to compare, to quickly compare amongst these proposals that has been submitted in different formats. It is not to replace them. It is an aid to be able to go through them in summary form and compare across. Is that correct?
I'd say pretty correct. I mean, it can be a decision-making tool also, but what Dana intended and what I did to follow his logic on what he had proposed, the other day, was for comparative purposes. And the best example of it is the top one, where you have moratorium on STR. Most people said they adhered to that idea, but they had different years in there. You look across the top row and you're going to see 3, 4, 5 in terms of years. That's an easy one. The others are a
That's
little
trivial. Yeah, I mean, relatively trivial.
But as a model, that's what it's intended for. So on one, and literally on your own computer screen, it's much easier to scroll this thing around and see. But I can go right across the row on any one of these things and see there might be 4 different opinions on some kind of a permit issue or number of rentals per year or something. For comparative purposes, that's where Dana did the service for us. He said, let's do something to compare these things, because right now it's apples, oranges, pineapples, and squirrels. So now we have a comparative tool. NIP is just saying, let's get on with it. Maybe use it as a decision-making tool too. And I'm saying, fine, as long as we leave ourselves the opportunity for people who want to present their plan in a more holistic view to make sure people get it and maybe buy it, that we leave ourselves that opportunity too. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
But Nip, I thought that you wanted to hear everybody present their plan so that we can question them and better understand it. Now we're going to take just pieces of somebody's plan and compare across it. It's the same darn thing we've been doing. It's just, can't we look at the whole? I mean, I'd like to hear what someone says about their plan and their approach and be able to talk to them about it. Ask them questions about it, because I'm open to the different plans and I'd like to understand it better. But if we're just going one parameter by one parameter by one parameter, it's the same damn thing we've been doing.
Let's do the matrix and the prioritization. And at the next meeting on the 21st, we'll see if we came to agreement on what's in the matrix. And then we'll decide whether we want to schedule the next meeting to hear everybody's proposal. How is that? Okay, Dana's thumbs up. Beth, Blake, okay, me, Nip, okay, we'll do that. So the 21st, matrix review, discuss plan seminar, let's call it that way. For next meeting, which looks like it would be late July, early August. Late July, early August. Okay. All right, everybody's good with that? Okay. Other business. That's pretty meaty work products to look forward to for the next 3 weeks or so. I don't see anybody raising their hand saying, man, God, I got to do this. Has anybody got a motion to adjourn? Before we do that, there was some talk earlier. This is off agenda, but it's agenda business. So for the next meeting, we may try to have the public hearing on solar. We talked about doing it outside like they did the annual meeting. Probably not really conducive to that. And the solar hearing, we're probably going to get a couple of people who say, yeah, what are you wasting our time? Go ahead and do it. So probably not going to be a hot button issue. What Jen has offered to do is be set up with her computer in the firehouse if somebody wants to come there and comment to the hearing, but we'd be on Zoom. And then we get a literal record of everything that's said. This is again off for the August meeting. So I plant that seed with you to think about, whether you have a better idea of how we might do that. But that's the way Jen and I were leaning towards today. So I don't have any other business, and the agenda said that was the only item we had, which was consideration of the individual plans, which we've just beaten partly to death. So has anybody got a motion to adjourn? Blake? Is there a second? Beth? Okay, that's a second, Dana, not a comment? Okay. All right, all those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Thank you all. Another good meeting, appreciate it. Stop the recording. I didn't last time. Stop. Oh, I can't stop it.